A single short phrase, "I'm having dinner with a coworker," and a crack spread through what once felt unshakable. There were no fights, no yelling, no accusations, just a pause, just a glance, just a thought that took root and began to grow. What if things were already falling apart? While she got ready for the meeting, he stayed silent. While she left, he remained. And then he followed, not out of revenge, but in search of inner quiet, something that either needed to be reclaimed or shattered completely. And when he saw it with his own eyes, calm conversation, measured gestures, no touches, it didn't bring peace. Because sometimes the fear doesn't come from betrayal itself, but from realizing you let things drift too far without asking a single question. And now, in the stillness of night, the answers will finally be spoken. But will they be enough to save what has long been pleading to be heard? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. After yet another exhausting day buried in deadlines and office politics, Dylan collapsed onto the couch, desperate for some quiet. The television droned on in the background, its soft chatter filling the otherwise silent room. He glanced at the clock, frowning. Elena was usually here by now, but tonight, the room stayed conspicuously empty. When she finally appeared, Dylan immediately picked up on a subtle tension hanging around her like static in the air. Her eyes gave it away. There was a weight behind them, a hesitation that warned him something uncomfortable was coming. She moved toward him slowly, each step purposeful, until she stopped just short of the couch and crossed her arms tightly. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm having dinner with Miles on Friday. He's a coworker." She hesitated, watching her words carefully. "He's invited me a few times, and this time I said yes." Dylan blinked in surprise, the name unfamiliar and jarring. Miles? He couldn't place it. No memories surfaced. Her admission caught him completely off guard. What unsettled him more was how casually she had delivered the news, as if it were no more important than reading off a grocery list. "Dinner?" he echoed, trying to mask the knot forming in his gut with a tone of forced neutrality. "With someone from work?" She nodded. "We've been collaborating on a major project." He thought it would be useful to brainstorm away from the office. Her gaze held his, as if bracing for impact. Dylan drew a slow breath, trying to steady the emotions that threatened to break through. Insecurity and suspicion simmered just beneath the surface. Rather than admit it, he retreated into his old habit, sarcasm, sharp and defensive. "Interesting," he replied, voice like flint. "Maybe I'll grab a bite with Lucy." A little out of office strategizing. Elena frowned, caught off guard by his tone. "You're not serious, are you?" "Why not?" he said coolly. "Apparently, mixing business with dinner is in vogue." The space between them grew heavy, thick with things unsaid. Elena remained silent for a beat, studying him, her expression difficult to read. Finally, with careful clarity, she said, "Dylan, there's nothing inappropriate about it. It's strictly for work." He let out a dry laugh, one that lacked any trace of humor. "Of course. Just business." Her second sigh carried more weariness than the first. She seemed to decide the conversation wasn't worth extending. "I'm going to bed. Good night, Dylan." She turned and left, and he sat motionless, eyes on the screen but seeing nothing. A seed of doubt had been planted, and now it was rooting deep. He wanted to press her, ask more, demand something, anything, but pride sealed his lips. What he truly craved was reassurance, but instead, he sat in silence. As the hours crawled by, Friday began to loom ahead, casting a long, uneasy shadow. In the days that followed, Dylan moved through his routines like a man adrift. The feeling never left, It hovered constantly, like the threat of rain. What had started as a brief flicker of unease had grown into something persistent and nagging. Who exactly was this Miles? Why had Elena said yes now, and why had she never mentioned him before? At work, even brief moments of stillness became breeding grounds for suspicion. Am I reading too much into this? He asked himself, trying to convince his better judgment. Maybe it really was just about work, but the way she'd said it, with no invitation for input, no hint of conversation, still stung. She'd told him, not asked. Amid his spiraling thoughts, Dylan found himself noticing Lucy more than usual, the friendly colleague who always had a smile or a clever quip. Their casual work banter had always stayed just that. But now, a different thought began to tug at the corners of his mind. What if there was something more there, some kind of connection waiting to be explored? The idea unsettled him, yet offered a strange kind of emotional equilibrium. As Lucy walked him through a routine update, Dylan found himself watching her more closely, her expressions, her laugh, the way she spoke. Then, catching himself, he looked away, guilt washing over him. This wasn't him. He wasn't the kind of man who retaliated, who used people as emotional rebounds. And yet, the fact that he'd even entertained the thought told him just how much Elena's announcement had shaken his foundation. That evening, the silence between them was louder than any argument. They spoke only when necessary, about bills, chores, schedules. Dylan found himself studying her in quiet moments, searching her face for changes. Was she really pulling away, or was he imagining it? Everything she did now felt exaggerated. How long she stayed on her phone, how quickly she avoided his gaze. His mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe Miles was older, happily married, and genuinely only interested in work. But what if he wasn't? What if Elena wasn't being fully honest? The uncertainty was the hardest part. It chipped away at his peace, day by day. That night, lying beside her, Dylan turned to stare at the ceiling, listening to her gentle, rhythmic breathing. And then, in the stillness, it struck him, a pang of remorse. What if I've been wrong this whole time? Could it all be in his head? The idea nagged at Dylan relentlessly, like a quiet buzz in the background that never quite faded. Or what if, despite everything, his instincts were right? The week dragged toward Friday, each day stretching longer than the last, thick with a silence between them that grew heavier, harder to ignore, forming a wall neither dared to breach. Dylan's stubbornness kept him from starting an honest dialogue. He chose to swallow his doubts while she moved through the days with a practiced ease, pretending all was well. But they both knew things weren't. Their lives no longer fit the pattern they once shared, and they could feel the difference. When Friday came, it brought with it a shadow of anxiety. All day, Dylan carried a heaviness in his chest, a quiet pressure that refused to lift. He tried to immerse himself in work, but the unease clung to him like a damp coat. Each hour crept by in agonizing increments. That dinner, he couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't jealousy that haunted him, not exactly. It was the craving for certainty. When Elena finally came downstairs just before 7, Dylan was still on the couch. She wore something simple but refined, a style that highlighted her grace without drawing attention. Somehow, that made it worse. He tried to mask the storm within him, but the tension simmered under the surface. She passed through the living room, grabbed her purse, and shot him a quick glance. "Don't wait up. I might be out late," she said, voice light, unaffected. Her calm tone twisted something in his gut. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to lay it all bare, but the only thing he managed was a stiff nod. She walked out without another word, the door clicking shut with a finality that reverberated through the stillness. For a moment, Dylan sat frozen. Then, driven by something deeper than reason, he stood. He couldn't just sit there doing nothing. That wasn't in his nature. Grabbing his keys, he paused for a breath to steady himself before stepping into the night. It wasn't a choice he was proud of. Truthfully, he felt ashamed, but his need for answers overpowered his sense of dignity. As he drove, he strained to recall the name of the restaurant Elena had casually dropped in conversation earlier that week. Once there, he parked at a distance and approached on foot, heart pounding. Peering through the window, he spotted her, seated near the front, across from a man. Miles. Dylan found a vantage point where he could watch without being seen. His eyes tracked their movements, searching every detail for meaning. Miles seemed unremarkable, maybe a little younger, nothing notable about him. Even so, watching them together stirred something uneasy in Dylan. Their conversation looked focused. Miles gestured often, and Elena listened with a composed attentiveness. No flirtation, no lingering glances, just what seemed to be a professional discussion. Dylan remained, hoping to catch something definitive, something that would either confirm his fears or lay them to rest. But all he saw only deepened his uncertainty. Am I just imagining this? The longer he stood outside, the more the doubt crept in. The act of spying on her left a bitter taste. It felt dishonest, beneath the man he thought he was. But along with the shame came a subtle wave of relief. Nothing he had witnessed suggested betrayal, and yet a sense of unrest lingered. Was he trying to catch her in a lie, or afraid he had misjudged her all along? Eventually, they both stood up. Dylan hesitated, unsure whether to leave or stay hidden. He watched them part ways. Miles offered a courteous goodbye, shook her hand, and got into a cab. Elena paused, checked her phone, then ordered her own ride. Dylan waited until she was gone before he turned and walked slowly back to his car. The ride home passed in a haze of tangled thoughts. Part of him believed it had all been innocent, nothing more than a work meeting. Another part boiled with shame for having doubted her in the first place. Once home, he remained in the car, wrestling with his own guilt and confusion. A conversation with Elena loomed ahead, unavoidable, but he still didn't know what he'd say. Inside the house, he dropped his keys on the table and stood still, struck by the emptiness of the space around him. Her absence felt different now, sharper, colder. The doubt hadn't faded, it had only changed shape. Now it carried guilt. Not just for following her, but for realizing how far apart they'd grown, without either of them noticing it happening. Time passed before the front door finally opened. Elena stepped in, purse in hand, her face unreadable, drawn with fatigue. She saw Dylan sitting on the couch, eyes fixed on the blank TV screen. She paused, unsure. "You're still up," she said gently. Dylan turned to face her, meeting her gaze. "I couldn't sleep," he replied, his voice calm but weighted. She set her purse down on the table, her eyes never leaving his. Something had shifted. The silence between them wasn't just awkward anymore. It felt loaded. "What's going on?" she asked, folding her arms as if bracing for impact. Dylan took a breath, carefully choosing his words. "I wanted to know how dinner went." Elena blinked, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. "It was fine," she said after a beat. "We went over the project. Nothing more." He gave a slow nod, never breaking eye contact. "Elena, I need to be honest. These past few days have been really hard. This entire mess." He paused, caught in a silent war between pride and the need to speak. "Lately, my thoughts have been scattered. It's like my mind keeps spiraling, imagining things that might not even be real." She inched forward, sensing something deeper. "Imagining what, exactly?" Dylan faltered, just briefly, but the moment for retreat had passed. "I went to that place. I saw you and Miles together." His confession landed with a thud, heavy and undeniable. Elena's posture shifted, her face clouded by shock. "You were watching me?" she asked, clearly blindsided. "I didn't know what else to do," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly despite his efforts to contain it. Out of the blue, You tell me you're meeting some coworker I've never heard of. For dinner, no less. There was no context, no effort to ease my mind. What was I supposed to make of that? Elena slowly shook her head, struggling to make sense of it all. I thought you trusted me, Dylan. How could I, when it felt like something was being deliberately hidden? He stood up, his hands gesturing as frustration leaked through his words. I watched the two of you talk. It didn't look romantic. But the fact that I had to spy just to be sure, that alone says something about where we are. Elena took a slow breath, collecting herself. You're right. I should have been more upfront. But do you know why I wasn't? Because lately, it seems like no matter what I say, it's like you're not really hearing me. Dylan didn't answer. Her words landed hard. He realized even in that moment she wasn't wrong, but the truth still stung. What are you trying to say? He asked quietly. She stepped closer, letting the emotion finally reach the surface. I've been lonely, Dylan, for longer than you probably know. I needed someone to open up to, about work, about life, about everything I've been carrying. Miles was just there. He listened. That's all it was. He wasn't special. Just someone who made me feel heard because I didn't feel like I could turn to you. Her honesty chipped away at his defenses. He stood frozen, absorbing each word, even as they pierced him. And slowly, he began to understand. He'd been so wrapped up in his own stress, his own spiraling thoughts, that he hadn't noticed the growing distance between them. She kept going, her voice trembling now. That dinner? It was about a promotion. I needed a change, something that made me feel seen again. It had nothing to do with Miles. It never did. It had everything to do with what's been missing between us. Dylan swallowed hard, her words settling in like cold, heavy rain. The pride that had been holding him together began to slip away, replaced by a sharper, more painful clarity. He wanted to say something profound, something that would bridge the gap. But all he managed was, I didn't realize you felt that way. Elena looked at him, still hurt, but also relieved, as though a burden had finally been released. Maybe that's because you never asked. Dylan stood there, motionless in the center of the room, seeing her clearly for the first time in what felt like ages. Her words rang in his ears, peeling back truths he'd refused to face. The silence that followed wasn't cold or distant. It was heavy, yes, but honest. The kind of silence that follows truth, finally spoken aloud. I never wanted you to feel that way, he said, barely more than a whisper. I swear, I didn't see it. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her voice stayed steady. That's just it, Dylan. You didn't see it, not because you're cruel or because you stopped loving me, but because you closed yourself off. And to be fair, so did I. He lowered his gaze, the weight of her words pressing down on him like stone. There was nothing to argue, nothing to deny. He'd buried himself in work, deadlines, routine, and in the fear that if they didn't talk about the cracks, maybe they weren't real. But now, it was impossible to ignore. The real damage had come from what had been left unsaid. When did things start falling apart? He asked, knowing there was no simple answer. Elena let out a slow exhale and perched on the edge of the couch's armrest. I'm not even sure. It wasn't one big moment. It was 100 small ones. Times when I should have spoken up but didn't. Times when you should have noticed but didn't. Dylan moved toward her, sitting on the couch but leaving space between them, as if unsure whether he still had permission to close it. I followed you because I was afraid. He paused, trying to find the words that mattered. Afraid that I'd already lost you. Elena met his gaze again, softer this time. You haven't lost me, Dylan. Not because of this. But if we keep going like we have been, without real conversations, without truly listening, we're going to lose ourselves. Her words didn't come as an accusation, but as a quiet, undeniable truth. And it rattled him. He realized how long he'd been hoping that silence could fix things, that problems might fade if left alone. But now that the silence had broken, there was no going back. Dylan exhaled, long and slow, bracing for the truth he had avoided most. I thought that by following you, I'd learn something about you. But what I really discovered was something about me. Elena's eyebrows rose subtly, surprised by the unexpected candor in his words. She remained quiet, choosing to let him speak without interruption. I think I've spent so long pretending to have everything figured out, trying to seem in control, that I ended up pushing you away, he confessed. And not just you, everything that actually matters. When I began to sense you drifting from me, whether it was real or just in my head, I panicked. Dylan, Elena began, but he raised his hand softly, cutting her off. Just let me say this, he urged, his voice calm but firm. His gaze met hers with a rare seriousness. I'm sorry, Elena, for not being there when you needed me, for missing the signs. I should have shown up for you. I want to show up for you. She inhaled slowly, letting his words sink in. Dylan didn't often lay himself bare like this, and the depth of his admission stirred something unexpected in her, but she also knew that good intentions weren't enough on their own. I believe you, she replied with quiet conviction, but this can't be one-sided. I've got my own part in this too. I built walls, she said, her voice soft and steady. And instead of confronting what wasn't working between us, I let myself be pulled into distractions. Not anything improper, but enough to create more distance between us. They sat together in the quiet, facing the hurt they had both caused. It was the kind of unfiltered truth they hadn't shared in a long while. And though it brought a sting, there was also something strangely comforting in it, because by finally acknowledging their wounds, they could begin to heal. Dylan reached for her hand, his movement gentle, almost unsure. Elena didn't recoil. Instead, she wrapped her fingers lightly around his, a quiet but meaningful act that carried the weight of forgiveness and the fragile hope that what they had might still be rebuilt. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. She sat across from him, absent-mindedly poking at her cold dinner with a fork, as if she already knew she was about to bring their world crashing down. One question, and everything unraveled. Carefully rehearsed lines, theories about freedom and personal growth, all wrapped in the guise of concern. She wanted something new faces, new feelings, and suggested opening the marriage, not because something was missing, but because she was bored. But there are lines you cross that you can never return from. He agreed, not out of curiosity, but because he knew this was the end. While she was off discovering new versions of herself, he was building the exit. Quietly, calculated, cold. He had given her everything, and in return, she offered him a front-row seat to the dismantling of his own life. Now it was her turn, to watch as he erases her from his. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. I can still picture the night everything came crashing down, etched in my memory like a scene on repeat. Emily was seated across from me at the dining table, absently pushing her salmon around the plate, barely nibbling at it. Her eyes were distant, as though she were lost in thought, trying to unravel a puzzle with no pieces. Is everything okay? I finally asked, cutting through the thick silence. She blinked, almost as if I'd yanked her from another world, then gently set her fork aside. Yes. No. I don't know. She sighed, her voice trailing off before steadying. Justin, there's something I need to say. It's serious. I recognized that tone, one she usually used when proposing a spontaneous home renovation or adopting a dog. But this time, something was different, heavier. I leaned forward cautiously. Okay, I'm listening. She hesitated. Her fingers fidgeted with her wedding ring, slowly twisting it back and forth. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About how long we've been together. And I think maybe it's time to try something new. My forehead creased. New how? She paused before answering, and when she did, her words landed like a punch. I think we should try an open marriage. I stared at her, convinced I'd misheard. An open marriage? I echoed, the disbelief sharp in my voice. She nodded, her eyes locked on mine, though I could see the uncertainty swirling beneath the surface. Yes, Justin, I love you. I truly do. But I feel like we've settled into this routine. Maybe this could help us rediscover who we are together. A bitter laugh slipped from my lips before I could stop it. It was raw and cutting. So, let me get this straight. You want to sleep with other people but keep me as your husband? How generous of you. It's not just about intimacy, she snapped back, changing her tone as if defending herself. It's about personal growth, trust. We explore ourselves beyond the limits we have set. You really think I signed up for this? I said, shaking my head. I married you, not some self-actualization experiment disguised as a relationship. The rest of the night was a blur of arguments. She came ready, with phrases she'd clearly rehearsed. She said it wasn't because something was missing in me, talked about how monogamy was a social construct, cited examples of other couples who had tried it and come out stronger. I pushed back at every turn, telling her it felt like betrayal dressed up as enlightenment, that all it would do was unravel everything we'd built. But she held her ground. She leaned in, voice rising with urgency. I've been reading about this, she said, eyes steady. Couples who try it rediscover themselves. Their connection deepens. Justin, we've been married 10 years. I need more. I need to feel alive again. I need something new. Something new? I repeated, my voice cracking. Isn't that what this was supposed to be? Marriage, committing, building a life. She let out a frustrated groan, her words tinged with desperation. This isn't about you. You're amazing. I mean that. But I feel hollow inside. I don't want to lose you. I still love you. I just think we might both grow from this. My stomach churned. The woman I had vowed to spend my life with was now asking for permission to sleep with other men. I never imagined those words would come from her. I hadn't braced for this. I don't know, Emily, I muttered, shaking my head slowly. This doesn't sit right with me. How would something like that even work? She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine, gentle, almost pleading. We'd make rules, clear guidelines, no emotions, full honesty. We'd talk about everything. Justin, I need this, but I don't want to do it without you. Eventually, I agreed, not because I shared her vision, but because I needed to see where this would go. Maybe I was driven by a quiet sense of doom. Maybe I wanted to witness the wreckage firsthand. Even as I spoke the words she wanted to hear, my mind was already elsewhere, skimming ahead to the end of the story. If she was opening our marriage to others, then I was closing the chapter on us. That thought hit cold and deep, like ice splintering in my chest. I didn't say anything then, but I'd already made my decision. The very next morning, I began laying the foundation. While she went about her usual morning routine, I was online researching asset protection. I contacted 2 financial advisors. I booked a consultation with a divorce attorney. I laid everything bare, her proposal, my gut instinct, my exit strategy. As far as I was concerned, our marriage was already over. She just hadn't realized it yet. But I knew better than to show my hand before I was ready. Until everything was arranged, until the legal safeguards were in place and my future was secure, I decided to play along with her little social experiment. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was trapped in someone else's life. But behind every smile, every casual nod, I was quietly orchestrating the end. Emily didn't waste a second stepping into her newfound freedom. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Overnight, her style transformed. Her clothes hugged her curves with more intent. Her heels struck the floor with sharper purpose, and the perfume she wore was no scent I recognized. And then, as if scripted, she began dating other people. That was when the shift began, for both of us. It started one calm Saturday morning when Avery, her closest friend, came by for a casual cup of coffee. Avery had been a fixture in our lives for years, quick with a joke, magnetic in a way that balanced Emily's reserved, poised demeanor. She had that rare quality that drew people in without trying. As we sat chatting in the living room, Emily excused herself to take a phone call, leaving Avery and me alone. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Her expression wasn't laced with the sympathy I'd gotten used to from others. No, it was more nuanced, something softer, maybe even affectionate. And if I was honest, there was a glimmer of flirtation in her eyes. I'd seen traces of it before, a joke that lingered too long, a glance that seemed to hold weight, a smile that felt like an invitation. I used to shrug it off. She was Emily's friend, I was a husband. Back then, there were lines I refused to blur. Even the thought of entertaining those feelings felt like a betrayal. But those rules had been rewritten the moment Emily brought up the idea of an open relationship. The walls that once defined our marriage had collapsed. And for the first time, I didn't look away. I held Avery's gaze. "She's really going all in on this open marriage thing, isn't she?" Avery murmured, her tone deliberate and low. I glanced over, curious. "Why do you say that?" She lifted one shoulder in a casual shrug. "Just the way she acts around you, like you're barely there. It doesn't sit right with me." Her words hit harder than I expected. Over the days that followed, Avery and I started talking more. At first it was innocent, brief texts, playful back and forth, but it didn't stay surface level for long. She became the person I turned to, the one who reminded me I was still seen. One evening we decided to meet at a bar, just us. We didn't need pretense anymore. The conversation flowed easily, familiar and light, but with a thread of tension running just beneath. That night, something changed. The undercurrent we'd both ignored before rose to the surface. She gave me a look I'd seen many times, teasing, confident, but now it carried more weight. "Justin," she said softly, leaning in, "want to come back with me?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I answered, the word coming out before I even had time to think. The drive to her place was quiet, heavy with anticipation. We didn't need to speak. We both knew exactly what this was. By the time we stepped through her front door, the air between us was electric. She reached for me and kissed me, slow, assured. When she pulled back, her breathing was uneven, her eyes bright with emotion. "I've wanted this for so long," she whispered. "I always liked you, Justin. But you were married. I never thought this would actually happen. Still, I'm glad it did." There was no turning back after that. We moved toward her bedroom with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Everything else faded. In the days that followed, Emily dove headfirst into the life she claimed to have wanted. She started coming home later, more dressed up, exuding a kind of restless confidence, as if she was trying to make up for lost time. I, on the other hand, stayed still, steady. I let her set the tone, but I already knew the equilibrium had shifted beyond repair. Then, one night, she stumbled in, her perfume mingling with red wine, and a stranger's cologne. I was sitting on the couch, waiting. "How was your night?" I asked, keeping my tone level. She paused mid-step before answering. "It was fine. I met someone." "You met someone," I echoed, watching her closely. She added quickly, "We just talked." Her voice wavered as she moved toward the kitchen. But I knew better. She hadn't just talked. She'd crossed that same line. Still, I held my tongue. Let the silence stretch. Let her feel it. I wasn't going to pretend I didn't see through it. This was her game, her new terms. I was simply abiding by them. Eventually, I spoke again, casually. So, was it good? Did you have fun? She stiffened. A flush spread along her neck. Yeah, it was good. I gave a slow nod. And then, almost offhandedly, I dropped my own truth. I did too, actually, last night. Her head whipped around, eyes sharp with disbelief. What? She asked, her voice brittle. Yeah, I said, letting each word land with intent. I spent the night with someone. She was amazing, honestly, one of the best nights I've had in a while. I kept my face calm, unreadable, as I watched her take it in. You were right, Emily. This is exactly what we needed. There it was, the flicker. That flash of jealousy. She tried to hide it, turning back toward the kitchen, pretending to be busy. But I saw the way her fingers trembled, the way her back straightened with tension. You're not angry? She asked, her voice clipped and cautious. No, I said easily. Why would I be? This was your idea, remember? I'm just following your lead. I'm simply following the rules you set. Fair game, isn't it? The space between us turned thick with tension, her silence laced with disbelief as she processed my words. I had twisted her logic back on her, and the discomfort it brought her was almost palpable. Who is she? Emily asked at last, her voice brittle, tinged with something sharp, part pain, part accusation. I gave a nonchalant shrug, keeping the satisfaction off my face. Doubt she's someone you'd know, I replied. But she sees me, really sees me, makes me feel whole. Her fingers curled tighter around the countertop. A glint of jealousy flared in her eyes, betraying her before she could smooth her features into indifference. You're not that important, Justin. I don't give a damn who you sleep with. But she did. Far more than she was willing to admit. What began between Avery and me was easy, effortless. At first, just a spark without expectation. But it didn't stay that way. With each meeting, something deeper quietly formed. It wasn't just passing time, it was connection. Real, unexpected. I found myself laughing more, lingering in our conversations, craving the next moment with her like air after drowning. And behind the scenes, the rest of the plan unfolded. Quiet, calculated, unforgiving. Divorce had always been part of the endgame. But I wasn't about to let Emily walk away with half of everything, just because she'd grown bored and wandered into other men's beds. My legal team made sure every angle was covered, assets safeguarded, accounts disguised in plain sight, properties reclassified. The snare was ready. Emily wouldn't see a penny more than I allowed. She had no clue the walls were closing in. I played it patiently, waited for the perfect moment. And when she stepped out to meet yet another so-called friend, I made the call. Avery answered. I told her, tonight's the night. I needed her here. It had to be just the two of us, and I wanted Emily to witness exactly what she'd thrown away. I set everything deliberately, every detail in place. Avery showed up soon after, that effortless smile on her lips, as if she already understood the weight of what the evening would bring. There were no formalities. We were far past that. In the bedroom, tangled in her warmth, the bitterness dissolved into something cleaner. The betrayal, the years of Emily's lies, the slow corrosion of everything I had tried to preserve, it all faded into a single pure sensation, clarity. I didn't need Emily anymore. I had chosen something real, with Avery. Then, like a well-rehearsed scene, I heard the door. Her voice echoed through the hall. Justin? My body stilled for just a beat. Avery slipped away from me, already heading toward the entrance. It was happening. Emily stepped into the room, her eyes freezing on the sight before her. The blood drained from her face. What? What is this? She asked, her voice cracking under the weight of confusion and dawning horror. I rose calmly, my voice level. Is something wrong, sweetheart? Her hands trembled. She backed away a step, struggling to breathe. You? With her? Yes. Her voice broke. But we had an agreement. See other people, sure, but no emotions, no attachments. Avery walked forward, her tone deceptively breezy. Appreciate the freedom, really. Justin's incredible, by the way. Best I've ever had. Emily's face twisted, shock warping into something deeper, something guttural. You? You slept with my husband? You were supposed to be my best friend. How could you betray me like this? Her words fractured with grief, the pain finally rising to the surface. Avery's gaze stayed steady. You wanted an open marriage. We just followed the guidelines you laid out. And what's going on between Justin and me? It's not just about intimacy. She looked Emily dead in the eye. We're together, for real. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She stared at us, stunned, like someone watching her world cave in from the inside. So, this is real? You're choosing her? I took a breath and stepped closer. There was nothing left to hide. No more veils, no more games. Yes, Emily, I'm with her, and it's not a fling. Her sobs turned raw, her body trembling, but I wasn't finished. I've already filed the paperwork. This marriage is over. Her face crumpled, shattered by the truth. You filed for divorce? She whispered, barely above a breath. Justin, please, don't do this. We can fix it. Let's just talk. Just talk. I shook my head. Firm. Final. No, Emily. There's nothing left to fix. You've done more than enough. I gave you the space you wanted. But that ends now. I'm done. Done with this, and done with you. Her body gave out beneath the weight of it all, collapsing to the floor as her hands covered her face and sobs tore through her. I never meant to hurt you, she murmured through the tears. There was a time when I believed in second chances, when I thought we could rebuild, find some version of happiness again. All she ever really wanted was to feel something real. I looked down at her, my face unreadable. Is that what this was about? Just chasing some sense of being alive? You never once stopped to think about what this would do to me, Emily. What it would do to us. But now, I'm finally thinking about what I need, and this is it. The silence that followed said more than any argument ever could. Emily wept quietly on the floor. Behind me, Avery stood in stillness, her presence firm, her resolve unshaken. There was no comfort left for Emily. Not from me, not from anyone in that room. She had lost everything. When the divorce was finalized, she walked away empty-handed. No payout, no property, nothing from the life we had built together. She stepped out of that house one final time, and I never saw her again. Soon after, I put the house up for sale, not just to move on from the structure, but to bury the remnants of everything it symbolized. The broken promises, the deception, the pain. I needed space, a clean break from all of it. Avery and I packed up and started over in a new city, ready to begin a life untouched by what came before. In that new place, I began to rebuild, not a copy of the past, but something real, something earned. With the shadows behind me and Avery beside me, I could finally move forward. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.